Hi guys, and welcome back to Eerie Covenant. How are you today? I hope all is well. And in this video, I wanted to go over some of my paranormal experiences. I wrote down quite a bit. And so I just wanted to talk about it in the month of October. I love the paranormal and wanted to share with you guys some of my personal scariest experiences. Now, I have had too many dealings with the spirit world to count, but for the month of Samhain, I would like to share some of my biggest experiences. The first one I discussed in a previous video, when my mom and my family realized that I had this ability when I was younger. Around 3 years old, I had an imaginary friend, and her name was Amy. Amy and I were extremely close. If my mother made me a meal, she had to make Amy one. If I walked around the house, I held Amy's hand. My mom got a little scared about it, took me to the doctors and had me evaluated, and they said I was fine. So after that, it started getting to where I'd be up all night. My mother would wake up at 2 or 3 a.m., and I'd be up in my bed talking to Amy or reading her bedtime stories from my little books. And my mother started doing her own digging and realized and found and researched that a little girl named Amy had died in that apartment previous to us living there. When we moved, I no longer talked to Amy or had her around as my imaginary friend. So that could have been chopped up as a coincidence and all, but I started having more experiences that my parents witnessed and stuff. Around 12 years old, I remember my bed by my doorway in this one house we had. And in the doorway, there was a long hallway that led into our living room and kitchen. And the only thing in that hallway besides my room at the end of it was the bathroom. But at night, we would hear footsteps pacing back and forth all night. And I remember that while everybody else could hear the footsteps, I could actually see the presence of a woman who had killed herself in this area that we were staying. And she would just pace back and forth up and down the hallway. And then she would just stop at the end of it and look at me and then just dart right toward me, and her face would stop inches from mine. And I remember being so terrified and scared. I couldn't even sleep in this place because I always feared that moment when she would run at me and stop and stare at me, and I would just pull the blankets over my head and freak out, and my mother would have to come in and comfort me. But yeah, so another one for me growing up was shadow people. They have plagued me my entire life. Along with what I think are soul fragments, I call them. They kind of remind me of shadow people, only they look more creature-like. They're little fragments. Sorta reminds me of like a spider kind of insect, the shape. And they move very eerily. Almost, you ever see in the movies when things kind of twitch and it kind of leaves like a trail? Well, I would see many of these kind of accumulate on the walls and crawl up into the corner of the shadows, and they would just accumulate there. And I've seen this a few times, and what I think it is fragments of souls or the spirits, and they're trying to manifest. And I do believe they're negative, they're trying to manifest into a negative entity. They're just not fully manifested yet. That's my personal thought on what that is. It's taken me years to try to decipher things like this that I've seen. And at some points I did think I was going crazy, but apparently I'm not. So I had a shadow figure through most of my young life, and it was very, very tall. And it used to knock on my bedroom doors at night. And if I answered thinking it was my sister or my mom or someone, no one would be there. Well, if I also answered these knocks later that night, I started figuring out after I put two and two together, but if I answered this knock that night in my sleep, the blankets would just pull off of me from the bottom of the bed. And I'd look up and see this very scary tall figure. Now, I didn't have much experiences with sleep paralysis. It was more kind of like what people describe, what they see during it, only I wasn't paralyzed. I could see it. Fear paralyzed me, but it wasn't like a sleep paralysis thing. So it got to where I would shut my doors and I would not answer them with the knocking. So there are times I'd step out of the shower and a spirit would catch me off guard. And as if all of this wasn't enough to scare me, I was around 13ish and beginning to dabble before practicing my craft. I had learned things off family, seen things, so I was interested. But I kind of was a smartass this one day, and I taunted, asking the devil to appear to me if he was real. Nothing happened at that moment, and I can remember eating dinner and going to bed, and late that night, I don't know what woke me up, call it an energy or a force, but I had one moment. Sorry, guys. Okay, so I had woke up by this force, and in the corner of my room stood a beautiful man. He was very beautiful, almost how they would describe an angel, only he didn't have horns, didn't have wings. He wasn't a red man, but there was a look in his eyes that was empty, dark, and the energy in the room was very, very dark. And I do believe that it was Lucifer. Um, Gorgeous spirit, but the eyes still haunt me to this day, the emptiness. But there was still a curious glimmer of mischief also. So, yeah, that terrified me. But in seconds, he also vanished. So for years after that, I had enough. I was always afraid. These experiences are only a few in between, but day and night I would see spirits and was afraid of it. And also, when I'm on a location or see a spirit, it's not as simple as just seeing them. I get flashes of their past, their deaths, their emotions, their pain. So you see, I found an experienced medium. She taught me how to open and close this ability in my eye, third eye, that is, and to not be afraid and to help people in the spirits. So I have helped many people. I've helped the police in two different cases, and I've helped two paranormal teams with spirit troubles in the New York area. Now I open up and I can see in the spirit realm as well. And sometimes I can walk by a building and catch a glimpse of the past or something that happened there. And like if I'm on a road, for example, and a car accident happened there, I could get a flash of that and see it. If if I'm in somebody's house, say I'm visiting a couple that's friends of mine, for an example, I might see personal things like flashbacks of an argument they had a month ago. So it's pretty difficult to deal with at times, but the most rewarding thing about it is when I do help people. If I'm able to, it's the best feeling. Well, that was the biggest paranormal experiences I had. I hope you enjoyed this video, and as always, with love and light from Erie Covenant.